and identify the different spots that go from first meeting through to getting somebody on board, and saying, how can we become a little bit more effective in every step? How can we be a little bit more likable? How can we exercise a little bit more control over what the prospect does? How can we be a little bit more credible, so asking them to invest in us is not such a gamble?
Welcome to CustomerBloom's Growing Business Faster podcast, where we talk about all things related to growing and scaling your business in today's hyper-connected world. Gain insightful tips from experts about the tactics and tools that will make your business stronger. Now get prepared to accelerate your success with your host, Matt Coffey.
So we've got Matt Kimberley on the podcast this morning. Matt, say hi.
Hi.
You are the best, man. We tried to do this yesterday, but apparently we were so strong in our mental processes, we broke the internet.
I don't think we should even mention it. I think we're inviting fate to intervene once again if we say that we've been so lucky today with great internet.
I know. Well, we had elephants, clowns, and all sorts of things yesterday. I think that was part of the issue. But so, one of the things I love about Matt is that we've been in the past working together, and we had a lot of great conversations. In fact, it was the beginning of my discussion around putting a book together, and you and I had great discussions over this, and I'm excited that this thing's sort of in its way to being made. But one of the things you do really well is you are, to me, a performer. Like when I see you on stage, man, you take the audience with you, and I think this comes from your experience. When you grew up, what were you doing to give this experience to people, that you've got this sort of outgoing personality that just people want to watch?
Misguided self-confidence comes up. I think if you ask my parents, they would definitely say that I was always at the center of attention. I was always the person who was interested in having all the eyes on me, an attention whore, basically. People were, if they weren't interested in me, then what could they possibly be interested in? And it served me up until I got through the indestructible, bulletproof self-confidence of youth, and started to think about things more carefully and worry what people think about me, and realize that there were consequences to my actions and things like that. But if the question is, how do you, if the question, Matt, is how do you stand up on stage and bring the crowd with you, then I think it certainly a little bit of self-confidence is required, but that self-confidence can be manufactured, and it comes with training and repetition, rather like anything. If standing up on stage is a terrifying thing for you, then do it more frequently until it becomes less scary.
I hear you. Now, your book, right, Get a Grip, is forgetting about the namby-pamby, wishy-washy self-help dribble. That's a great subtitle. I read it. I laughed. I cried.
Did you get a grip?
I have a grip.
Have you still got it?
I'm holding on to it right now, as a matter of fact.
I don't want to know.
Exactly. So, that is interesting. Now, we've got a coaching business, obviously, that you're doing. We've got you're working with Michael Port. Now, Michael Port is a rock star in the world of, I guess, it relates back to the stage presence and the ability to really come across as someone who's got confidence. And what is next for you right now? Because we wanted to get into this yesterday, but we never got to it. I wanted to understand where you're going with the business model, because it seems like you've kind of upgraded your brand. You've become more of a presence, I think, and you were in Africa last week, and so what are the things that you're doing that we should know about to get this discussion sort of into second gear?
Sure. So coming on the horizon is professional persuasion. Professional persuasion is a program that I've been developing for the last 5 years, just putting the finishing touch on it. By developing, I mean kind of by osmosis. I've been studying pretty hard since the year dot, really, how to get people to say yes to you. And I've read everything that's ever been written about it, and I've taken a lot of courses and, of course, taught hundreds, if not thousands, I think thousands of people at this point over the last 7 or 8 years or so in how to be more effective. And because I'm an inherently lazy person, and unlike many business development bods, I'm not massively ambitious, that can be a little bit of a disadvantage, I think. I think laziness is a disadvantage everywhere, but it can be a disadvantage if you're not ambitious as a business development person. And by not ambitious, I mean, I'm not, I've never been solely motivated by money. If you said you can have a ton of money, but you've got to work 18 hours a day for it, or you can have a reasonable amount of money and only work 6 hours a day, I will always go for the latter option. But with that in mind, and knowing very much my weaknesses, I've broken down the entire process of going from first meeting through to acquiescence or agreement, and identified the different spots that go from first meeting through to getting somebody on board, and saying, how can we become a little bit more effective in every step? How can we be a little bit more likable? How can we exercise a little bit more control over what the prospect does? How can we be a little bit more credible, so asking them to invest in us is not such a gamble? How can we be a little bit more persuasive in our closing? How can we be a little bit more urgent how can we be a little bit more effective in transferring the urgency of the situation to our prospects? And I've developed a series of tools, really, that I'm really excited to share with the world under the Professional Persuasion brand.
I love it. I want to be a little greedy here and ask you a question of my own self-interest. Because you've worked with so many people, I want to ask you, what do you see, before we get into the persuasion story, what do you see as the biggest common denominator between people who are successful and go for it, and those that are continually saying the same thing, which is, I'm gonna get to it. I'm almost there. I'm trying to. Those. It seems as if there is a separation between those who kind of cross the border and actually do the work that's needed. I'm just curious. You've spent so much time with so many people.
I think it's urgency in many cases. It's not true that those with the greatest need are the greatest action takers. For example, if you knew that your house was going to be repossessed next week, you'd pull out all the stops to try and make it happen. And I talk about this a little bit in the Kimberley Kids Kidney concept, which says, if our need is strong enough, then it can force us to take action. For example, if I said, Matt, you've got to come up with 100K this week, or 200K or 300K, whatever the figure is, can you do it? You'd say, nah, that's going to be tough. Whereas if I said, Matt, unless you come up with 200K this week, the kidney that your kid needs will not be available to you. You do it. You would just do it. However, there are some people for whom that is still a challenge. And those that I see who've come through all of our training programs, all my mentoring programs, my clients who have, seen rapid growth, and those who seem to be floundering or stuck at the first hurdle all the time is just the urgency. And that they're a little bit tougher with themselves. They say, my goals are less negotiable. I'm going to be slightly less soft on myself. I'm going to be slightly less forgiving of myself than perhaps the other people. I think you need to beat yourself up a little bit in order to do well. I think you need to say, here's what I'm going for, and that's the goal, and a certain amount of non-negotiability. The others who say, well, it would be great if, you can tell a lot from somebody's linguistics, what I'm hoping to do next year. I'd love it if and those who are less like that tend to say, it's what I'm doing. It's what I'm going to do. What are you doing this week? I'm going to have 5 sales conversations. As opposed to, it would be great if I could organize 5 sales conversations, for example.
Right. So it's being specific and being hungry and urgent.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people who are in the self-help coaching / self-improvement world. And I always get a different answer from people, but the theme that keeps coming back is, do you want it bad enough?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, are you comfortable? Because if you're comfortable, it's very difficult to make change.
Right.
If you are sitting on the couch, eating Doritos, drinking Bud Light, with a game on the 85-inch plasma, or that doesn't exist anymore, 85-inch wafer-thin 3D TV in front of you, it's very difficult to motivate yourself to get up because you're comfortable. Or if you've got a safety net, it's quite easy to say, well, I can afford to slip up a few times. But if you're not comfortable, if you don't have the safety net, if there is an element of discomfort, you're happy, and that might be from external or internal motivators or sources, then it's much easier to make change, I believe. One the way I motivate myself is by spending money I don't have. It doesn't mean I'm fiscally irresponsible. I've got 2 kids and they're in school, and we've got an investment property, and I'm not fiscally irresponsible, but I kind of vowed to myself that within reason I won't say no to anything based on price. So if somebody says, do you want to do this course? I'll say yes. Do you want to make this trip? I'll say yes. Invest in this piece of software? I'll say yes. And then I find that gives me a sufficient level of, it might not be the sagest thing, but I budget carefully. I'm not talking about spending the kids' school fees on the craps table. But I kind of vowed to myself that money is a resource to be mined rather than something to be held onto at any cost. So one way I make myself uncomfortable is by spending money I don't have.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean buying a super yacht.
No, absolutely not. That'd be fiscally irresponsible. But right. I think if you they say that entrepreneurs are either good at, they're better at, they have a higher risk tolerance, or people who are prepared to break out on their own either have a higher risk tolerance or greater risk management than others. There's 2 sides to this coin. One say, I'm happy to take risks, therefore the upside is going to be greater. But other arguments are that, well, actually entrepreneurs or self-employed people are much better at mitigating risk. So they're better at managing risk. So yes, they'll be prepared to take a risk, but they know that they have a backup plan, or they have some way of mitigating that risk. I think what I see amongst those who are making less rapid advancement in their business is that they're not prepared to take the risk because they're happy to rely upon the mitigation.
Agreed. One of the things that was explained to me by another one of the self-help or self-improvement or business improvement guys was that you don't love your kids enough. And he hit me like really hard, like between the eyes with that one. He says, if you're not making advancements forward in your business, then you don't love your kids enough to give them a life that they will not have unless you make the effort. And I thought that was great.
That reminds me of the kind of sales tactics we'd use in the timeshare industry.
Yes.
We'd have a family sitting in front of us, and we'd look to the kids and we'd say, if in 8 years' time, when you want to go to university and your daddy looks you in the eye and daddy's sitting right there and says, I'm sorry, kids, we can't afford it. No, it's because he made the wrong decision today.
Yeah, no, it's a great closing strategy.
It's awful. It's hideous, but I understand. Yeah, who was it who said, timid marketers have skinny kids? Somebody famous said that. It might have been, I'm not going to put, it's quite a controversial statement, but if you Google it, it will come up and make sure the right person gets credit. But yeah, I've heard that before, and it's, yeah, I don't know, mate. Like I said, I'm probably the wrong person from an ambition point of view. I know when I certainly didn't. My dad, who was the opposite of being entrepreneurial, he dedicated himself to a life of service and poverty to a certain degree, as a clerk in the holy orders, right? I certainly wouldn't have felt more loved had he had $1 million in the bank. Right. I don't think.
So this is kind of going to this strategy. So, you're all over the place. You're in Africa. You're at Superfast.
I'm literally all over. Never has a truer thing been said. I'm all over the place. I don't know what I'm doing. Man.
Yes, you're doing a song and dance on Saturn next year. I understand. No, but so I call this the radar of opportunity. I think you're tuned in a lot to the higher levels of opportunity because you've been around these people. Again, you were at Superfast Business, right, in Australia?
I was in February or March this year.
And then you were over with Chris Ducker in the Philippines for his annual FRF, right?
Tropical Think Tank.
Yeah.
Yep.
TTT. I can't remember. So many acronyms in this world. So you get around these people, and I think the radars of opportunity just come into your. It's almost as if you're at a higher rev cycle than most people are at. Can you expand upon that just a little bit?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Firstly, on a purely practical level, don't be expected to speak at a conference if the conference organizer doesn't know who you are, if that's your goal. Yeah. Don't be expected to be invited to bid for an RFP if the purchasing manager doesn't know who you are. Don't be expected to win the business if the prospect doesn't know who you are. So you have to be known, right? I network shamelessly, and in fact, this is like the corner. I believe that everybody will have greater results if more people know what they do, for a start. And managing relationships using tools to help you stay on top of them is absolutely part. I'm not one for morning routines or daily routines. I'm sure I would be a better person and businessman if I had some kind of strict morning regime. But one of the things that I do religiously is look into my CRM system and say, who are the important people in my life that haven't heard from me in a month?
Right.
And reach out to them. And this is taken straight from the Book Yourself Solid practice. It's called the networking and direct outreach strategy. Continue to strengthen existing relationships and make new relationships with, make friends with people you want to have relationships with. So I do that kind of religiously, and I tend to say yes to all and any opportunity. And I think that this kind of spirit of not everything. And as the requests become more frequent, obviously I have to filter them more and more. But why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you say, I'd love to? Why wouldn't you work those relationships? Michael Port, again, I just keep referring back to everything he's taught me over the last 7 years. Teaches me and everybody who goes through the heroic public speaking training that friends get friends work. So that's not just a case of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's who knows what you know, and do they like you? Because if they do, they'll recommend you and they'll refer you. And the reason I spoke at Chris Ducker's event in the very first place last year, 2015, is because one of the speakers, Amy Schmittauer, is a good friend of mine, and she recommended me. And Chris said, yes, Matt would be great. I've heard good things about him from other people I know. And so I became great friends with Chris. And on the back of that, I went to his event and I met James Schramko, who was in attendance. He watched me speak. He said, you're great. Would you like to come to Superfast Business? I said, I would love to come to Superfast Business. And it works like that. If you hide, then make sure that your business model supports being invisible.
Right, and I think that it does take a certain type of person to have an outward ability to do what you do really well, which is to have a stage presence. And we just had our event down in Mexico, which was great. And we had
Arriba.
Yeah, I think I literally am still trying to recuperate. It was.
Are you still burping tequila worms?
Mezcal, but the whole thing about having and doing these, what I would call sort of life-changing events. I really do think if you jump on a plane, you go to the Philippines, you go to Cebu City, and you meet up with a bunch of really cool people from all over the place, it definitely has changes your perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm one of the concepts that I've become obsessed with over the last 12 months is normality. If your normal is get up in the morning, have a cup of tea, get in a car, drive to a miserable job that you hate, come home, hang around with a wife that you hate, sit down and watch some crappy TV, go to the occasional party with people you hate. Everybody around you is doing the same thing as you. Everybody's earning $35,000 a year. Everybody's complaining that they don't earn enough. Everybody's making the same purchasing decisions about size of TV, types of car. Everybody's going into debt. Everybody's going to college. Then that is your normal. That is your normal. If you, this is just a reworking of you are the sum total of the 5 people you hang around with. If you're normal, if you expose yourself to people who have a different normal, then your normal becomes different. If you expose yourself to people who no longer commute, you start to say, well, why am I commuting? That seems crazy. If you expose yourself to people who invest money in themselves, then you'll think, why am I not investing money in myself? If you expose yourself to people for whom 50K or 60K or 100K is a good month or a good week's worth of work, then you start to challenge your assumptions of normal. And we've known this, right? Because there are different, in the UK, in the States, everywhere, this idea of classes or strata of society where normal is the same for one group of people as it is for another group. Sometimes you have to change your geographic location in order to change your normal. If you live in a small regional town where everybody works in the only factory in town, then that is your normal. But if you travel outside of there and you expose yourself to a new normal, then you start to become accustomed to it. If you want to understand, what do you need to do to get a job in Wall Street? Well, I would say the first thing to do would be start to hang out with people who work in Wall Street. That would be it. Go and spend time with them. Make friends with them. Go to the bars they drink at. Go to the clubs they go to. Even if you don't have any money, you can still hang out with these people the right way. Go to community events, go to the churches they go to, I'm thinking of free opportunities, go to the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings they go to, whatever it is, in order to make these connections. Then don't be surprised if one day you find that it's quite normal that you get a job in Wall Street.
Yeah, it is getting around the new normal. It's a really interesting way to put it, which is that if you're accustomed to this higher cycle of what I call the radar of opportunity, maybe that's where this kind of becomes more where you just have those interactions with people who have got such a different viewpoint than the average Joe on the street, which I think you kind of nailed here, which is, being with Michael Port, you really understand, I know we've mentioned him a couple of times, and being around that level of I just think that there's a confidence of lifestyle, and people who are out there doing it and making it happen. I find it just fascinating that they're able to put the time into the business model that they're making, which is not, in our case, we do services for small businesses and medium-sized businesses here in the States, but just to put a brand around themselves. And of course, we're all trying to really do that at the end. If you own a business, you're trying to sort of brand yourself as the most important, aspect of the element of your life, because you can't really put things, you can't go back in time and say, I wish I did this. The only thing you have in front of you is to make sure that you have an exceptional life going forward. And most people, I think, just get drowned out by jumping in the car, just like you said, and just going to work, and it's all over with pretty soon. And then I'm sorry to interrupt you, no,
but
go ahead.
Otherwise I'll forget what I was about to say. The single thread that ties all of these people together, the same people that I see at conferences in the Philippines and in Australia, and then a few weeks later in Vegas, because they were the same people, all three, in many cases, is financial confidence. And that's not the same as financial security. They may not be secure today, but they are confident. And the reason that they're confident is because they know how to sell. They know that no matter what goes down, even if their financial rug is pulled out from underneath them tomorrow, because they know that they can ask other people for money and those people will be happy to give it to them for a fair trade, then what is there left to worry about? Sure, it doesn't mean that they are free of financial worries, but they have a level of financial confidence that isn't crippling people who live in a different normal. And that's, many people in my hometown where I grew up. And I think it's not a coincidence that I choose not to live there anymore.
I hear you, and that's the same with me. I think it's not even selling, though, because, yes, they have the ability to sell, but I think your biggest side of the business is that you sell by not selling. Like, literally, it's a different perspective. And I've had this discussion before, which is that people want to buy, not be sold. And you literally create that environment. And maybe this is dovetailing back into this persuasion strategy that you're coming up with. Why don't we dovetail it into this program, and then we'll kind of close it out for this session.
Sorry, so what are we dovetailing?
Into what
does dovetailing mean?
Well, I think really our dialogue is hitting into this persuasion strategy. At the end of the day, we kind of went through how people are motivated to do what you're at the higher levels of echelon of explaining, which is the persuasional tactics. So dovetailing is really melding this discussion back into your new outcoming program.
Is it a woodworking phrase?
Yeah, of course.
It sounds like
dovetail is a sort of joint between two pieces of wood.
Okay.
So you've got wood?
Have you got wood? Is that the question?
So let's go back into the power of persuasion and this new program. I'm really fascinated because, of course, I'll be one of the first persons to want to jump on.
Yeah, you will. Okay, so it's not... Again, confidence accounts for a certain amount, right? If you say that I'm selling without selling and people like to buy rather than be sold, I agree to you. People like to make their own decisions about buying. And if it looks effortless when... Have you seen Glenn Ross?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so there's the bit where the Al Pacino character is sitting in the bar and he's having a drink with the guy who is, I forget the guy who plays the prospect, the customer. He's talking about nothing. He's talking about his philosophy of life. He's hypnotizing this guy with over a whiskey or several. He's scribbling on the back of a napkin, and at the end of it, he doesn't know what's hit him, but the guy's purchased something. He comes back a couple of days later with buyer's remorse. Says, "I discussed it with my wife," and the Al Pacino character, who knows there's a legally mandated 72-hour cooling off period, says, "Just come back on Monday." So the thing is, it might look like it's effortless, or it might look like it's happening without strategy or technique behind it, but it's really not. I think it's like, if you watch Fred Astaire, not now, but back when he was active, if you watch him dance, you'd say it seems effortless. It's because he just practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. So that doesn't mean that we're operating on a higher plane. It means that if you do something frequently enough, then it does start to become second nature. I'm not talking about these crappy NLP techniques that some people teach, like selling from the stage. If you use the words "buy now," then people will hear "make a purchase now." Buy now. Easier to explain in writing, Matt. Buy now is the same. BY now is the same as BUY now, and we're not talking about hypnotism, but we are talking about just being conscious of what it's going to take in order to get the customer on board. And one of the things that I teach and preach and continue to bang my drum about is that you, the salesperson, and your product specifically should be the prize. Right. That's perhaps why it looks like there's not much selling going on, because I want people to come to me because they are excited about what it is. And I also want people to believe that they can't have it necessarily. Anything that's freely available and abundant is no longer valuable. Or at least we perceive that until we're denied it. It's like oxygen, right? We think it's not particularly valuable. We don't think about it until we're denied it. But I think it's the same with making an offer. And yes, I will actively encourage people to sign up, but I'd also make people know that, it might not be for you. Probably isn't for you in actual fact. And there is a little bit of psychology at work in that. The principles of professional persuasion have there are kind of 16 core points, and if you're the worst salesperson in the world with the worst prospects database in the world and the worst product in the world, but you have 1,000 conversations with people, you'll probably get lucky sometimes, right? You'll get lucky sometimes. So my argument is that if the worst salesman in the world can get lucky sometimes, that means that somebody who puts a little bit of effort and conscientiousness, deliberateness into their efforts, then they're going to increase their likelihood of making more sales. And that's my aim, is to help my clients make more sales. So we've got 16 stages that go from qualification, so identifying who you're going to spend time with or on, and that's about getting people to qualify themselves, all the way through to the close, and without leaving any stone untouched. We go through how to control your customer so that they're doing what you want them to do and you're not running around after them and serving them, because they very quickly your prospects, you should be serving your customer, but your prospects should be on a level playing field with you rather than having a master-servant arrangement. So you have to exercise some control over them. You've got to make sure you're likable. There are a couple of ways to make yourself more likable. You've got to make sure you're credible. There are some specific strategies to make you more credible. If you can be endorsed by an expert or a sponsor or a very credible third party, that can help. You've got to be able to clearly delineate the problem that you're going to be solving. And it might not be a serious problem, like it might be, problem is that your vacation's going to be shit unless you take this hot air balloon ride, because that's what all the cool kids are doing, and that's your solution. So you've got a problem, you've got a solution. You've got to know your product inside out and understand the ways that it will actively change their life. And then and that's what everybody teaches, right? Problem, solution, benefits. It's then about letting people know that they're not alone. It's about letting them know that they are in excellent company, because very few people like to be trailblazers, although there are instances when you can use the trailblazer approach in order to get people on board, kind of first mover advantage or the guinea pig close or something similar. You've got to make sure that you understand all of the reasons that they might not be buying from you and recognize when it's appropriate to address those concerns. If we reverse engineer, we want somebody to become a customer. Let's list all of the steps that they need to take in order to become a customer, and then let's look at all the reasons they might not become a customer and make sure that we're hitting each one of those points as we have this dance, this dance to the closing line with the customer, and that's really what the professional persuasion process is all about. We make the offer, we load the offer, we reverse the risk, we let it be known that there aren't many of them, that we have to have some element of scarcity and have to have some element of urgency, and we need to give them a concrete close, and the close might lead to somebody becoming a customer, or the close might lead to somebody agreeing to not become a customer so that you don't waste your time on it anymore. And this process can be applied to conversations with people. It can be applied to managing multiple conversations with people over a very long buying cycle. It can be applied to speaking on stage. It can be applied to selling on a webinar. It can be applied to writing a sales letter or a sales page. And that's the professional persuasion process.
I really dig it, and it sounds like this is going to be very exciting. Is this going to be a membership program? Is it going to be a one-time thing? What's the process, or have you spec'd that out? I'm just curious.
The final decision is going to be made in the next 3 weeks. It's definitely going to be something that I want to teach live in the first instance, and by live I mean in real time. So it's the first iteration of this is going to be a talk class, because I want to make sure that when it is improved and polished and made available as a consumable offer, either as a book or a course or something similar, that I'm really hitting every box. So I'll be running a beta program before the summer is out.
All right, for those who are listening, you better jump in the beta, because
I think you'd be pretty smart to jump in the beta.
You want to be on Matt's team. He is just an amazing. So let's wrap it up here. 2 last questions, and let's get you on your way. And appreciate you calling in. You're in Malta today, obviously.
I am. Sunny Malta in the Mediterranean.
Exactly. Love that. So first question, probably the most important question so far. Number 1 Scotch.
At the moment, Le Gavelin any year, or Lafroig any year.
Okay. All right.
I'm not fussy about the year. Something maybe 12 years or older.
Right. Not too fussy.
I like something really smoky, really peaty, something that tastes like you're just sucking on a charred piece of wood.
Okay.
Although I have enjoyed, actually recently I've enjoyed I'm not sure what's happening here. I can hear a drill in the background. I have enjoyed Ballantine's Blended recently. Ballantine's are making delicious blended whiskies.
Oh, my goodness. I can't believe it. I thought for sure you'd at least have a Glenlivet in there, or...
Yeah, I enjoy it. Listen, I'm not fussy. You know me, Matt. Whatever it is. If it's warm and wet, I'm happy.
Well, that's a good way to put it. So why don't we move on to the second question, which is where can we find you next? Where is Matt going to be speaking, or where are you going next? You just came from Africa, right? You almost went on a safari. Good thing you didn't, because I think there was a little bit of a rainstorm out there. Where is the next place that we can catch you, and where's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, the best way to get my agenda is fluid, which means once things are in it, they stay, but things are added to it all the time. So I'd recommend that you go to MatthewKimberley.com just to give me your email address, and we can become pen pals. I'll write to you from time to time, and if you want to, you can write back. And there, I will always keep people updated about where I am going to be. I know I've got something lined up. Probably my first solo event will be taking place on the East Coast somewhere before the end of the year. I'm still putting the finishing touches to that, but I'll keep you updated. Otherwise, I'll be back in Tanzania very soon, possibly going to South Korea as well, if any of your listeners would like to come and join me there. But the best way to find out is give me your email address, and I'll be writing to you.
Perfect. Awesome talking to you, Matt. I can't wait to catch up to you at some point. If you definitely are going to be on the East Coast, I'm going to hunt you down.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that every once in a while you do make it to New York City, which would be really cool to catch up there, and maybe we can go out and find some of this crazy, let's just say, alternative double wood burnt charred Scotch strategy.
There we go. That's what we'll do. We'll put the world to rights over a wee dram or two.
Exactly. All right. We'll talk to you soon. And again, anybody who wants to get with Matt, he is a really cool guy to hang out with, and also really smart. And I'm glad that we had you on.
Rock and roll. Thanks, buddy. See you soon.
We've reached the end of this episode of Customer Bloom's Growing Business Faster podcast. So be sure to subscribe to the show and stay connected to us on CustomerBloom.com. We appreciate you joining us and look forward to providing you with realistic ways to help support and accelerate your business here on the Growing Business Faster podcast, brought to you by Customer Bloom.